You've heard the headlines. A woman found dead in a backyard after a sleepover. Alcohol, a fall, an accident, that's what they say. But when the facts are inconsistent, when the system moves too fast, and when a mother of 5 dies surrounded by silence, we have to ask, what really happened? After the headlines, Unheard Stories. I'm Solomon Richberg, a licensed clinical social worker, and in the podcast, we go deeper past the headlines, beyond the reports, and into the lives that were left behind. Today, we're telling the story of Tamla Horsford, a woman whose death was ruled accidental, but whose legacy still demands answers. This isn't about conspiracy, it's about compassion and the right to be remembered truthfully. On the night of November 3rd, 2018, Tamla Horsford left her home to attend a birthday sleepover. It was meant to be a relaxing evening, just a group of football moms getting together to eat, drink, play cards, and unwind. The host, Janine Myers, had invited close friends and extended the invitation to Tamla through their son's sports connection. Tamla was excited. She wore a white pajama onesie with smiling lips printed all over it. She brought a bottle of tequila, a gift, and a gesture of community. She had planned to stay for the night. There were about 10 people in the house that night. 8 women, 1 man, the homeowner's boyfriend, and Tamla, the only black guest. Photos from that evening showed her laughing, comfortable, engaged. They played cards against humanity, watched football, passed around snacks. She smoked a cigarette on the back porch. She took selfies. She even FaceTimed her family to say she was having fun. She wasn't a heavy drinker, but she was being social. A few people said she had a few too many. Others said that she was perfectly fine. Just herself, energetic, sweet, present. Around 1:30 a.m., most of the guests had gone to bed. Tamla was seen in the kitchen cleaning up her PJs, barefoot and cheerful. A security system later showed a door opening at 1:49 a.m. That's believed to be the last time she was ever seen alive. The next morning, around 8:30 a.m., the homeowner's aunt, who also lived in the home, looked out the window and saw something in the backyard. It was Tamla lying face down in the grass. They called 911 and said she might have fallen off the deck. The tone of the call was strangely composed. No panic, no urgency. In the background, someone commented on how much she had to drink. Tamla's body was found approximately 15 feet from the deck, face down with her arms at her sides. She had blunt force injuries to her head and torso, a laceration on her heart, cuts and bruises on her arms and legs. Her wrist was broken. Her face had abrasions, but there are no signs of mud or grass on her feet. Her white pajamas were mostly clean. The railing she supposedly fell over, it was 3 feet high, tall enough that a fall wouldn't require imbalanced momentum force. The height alone might have been survivable, but the pattern and severity of her injuries suggested something else. Even more troubling, Tamla's body had been moved before police arrived. The people in the house had touched her, possibly repositioned her. Some claimed they tried to check her pulse, but no one attempted CPR. And then within hours, a narrative was already forming. She had too much to drink, that she must have fallen. Oh, that it must have been an unfortunate accident. Tamla's family and many who saw through the cracks weren't convinced because from the start, too many details didn't make any sense, and the story seemed more convenient than complete. From the moment Tamla's body was found, the official story began to solidify. She must have fallen. She's been drinking. It was just a tragic accident. But nearly everything about that morning and the days that followed raised more questions than answers. There were 9 other people in the house that night, yet almost none of the accounts match. Some said Tamla had gone to bed early. Others said she stayed up. Some describe her as heavily intoxicated. Others said she seemed completely fine. And while the house had a security system, the only confirmed activity was the patio door opening around 1:49 a.m. Nothing more. But that wasn't the only red flag. The 911 call was made at 8:59 a.m., but investigators later suggested Tamla may have been discovered over an hour earlier. In that time, no one performed CPR, her body was moved, and the scene was not preserved. Jose Barrera, the homeowner's boyfriend and a former probation officer, made the call. He described the body as stiff. He brought up alcohol even before confirming Tamla's condition, and later it was discovered that he had accessed the incident report using professional contacts before it was released to the public. That's not only suspicious, it's unethical. Tamla's phone, which she has been using that night to text her family, was never returned, and there's never been a clear answer as to where it went. The first autopsy listed her death was accidental. Blunt force injuries from a fall, alcohol in her system, even high blood pressure was mentioned as a factor. But her family didn't accept that. They commissioned a second independent autopsy, and that's when the inconsistencies grew louder. This autopsy found injuries that were not consistent with a simple fall. A lacerated heart, multiple abrasions across her face and limbs, a broken wrist in a defensive position, trauma to both the front and back of her body, and notably, no dirt or debris on her feet, despite allegedly falling from a second-story deck into the yard. And then there's the silence. People at the party didn't demand justice. No one expressed public outrage. Some lawyered up almost immediately. One gets admitted to deleting texts from the night of the party before being questioned. The case was closed quickly, a little too quickly. And when it was reopened later under public pressure, nothing changed. No charges, no further investigation. Just a quiet return to silence. For Tamla's family, that silence was louder than any explanation because something about that night never sat right. And the more that they asked, the less they heard. What happened to Tamla Horsford was never just about a fall. It was about what follows when a system decides not to ask more questions. When it becomes easier to close the file than to confront what the answers might reveal. Tamla's family didn't just lose her. They were also left to fight against a wall of polite indifference, where institutions, officials, and even neighbors seemed more concerned with preserving their version of peace than uncovering the truth. From day one, the message was subtle, but clear. This is unfortunate, but don't make it bigger than what it is. And when her family tried to speak up, they weren't met with compassion. They were met with doubt. They weren't looking to blame. They were asking to be heard. They were asking for due diligence, for transparency, for basic human decency. Instead, they were told it was just an accident. Let it go. But how do you just let it go when your mother, your wife, your daughter was found face down in a stranger's yard and no one can give you a consistent answer? The truth is, Tamla Horsford was the only black woman at the party, and to ignore that context is to ignore part of the truth. Forsyth County, Georgia has a documented history of racial hostility. It was the site of violent white mob action in the early 20th century, driving black residents out completely. It was a place where old biases still hang in the air, quiet but present. And while the people at the party may not have been hateful, silence itself can be a kind of violence when the only black woman at the gathering dies under unclear circumstances and everyone rushes to dismiss it without scrutiny. That's not neutrality, that's protection. Protection of power, protection of privilege, and protection of each other. Even when public attention turned towards the case in 2020, during the height of the protests for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, the renewed investigation was short. It felt like damage control, not a search for justice. Officials restated the conclusion: accidental death, no further action needed. No one pressed harder, no independent oversight, no empathy in their tone. For Tamla's family, it was devastating. Not just because the answers didn't change, but because it confirmed something deeper. That in their eyes, Tamla never mattered enough to warrant more than just a few brief reports and an autopsy summary. And here's where this story becomes bigger than a single case. This is what systemic silence looks like. It's not only a conspiracy, is not only a cover-up, sometimes it's just apathy in motion, a refusal to look too closely, a fear of disrupting the status quo, a quiet, unspoken agreement that some lives just don't require this much attention. That's what Black families have been navigating for generations. The sense that even in death, their loved ones must earn justice, must deserve investigation, must fight for the same treatment others are freely given. That's why Tamla's story matters, not just for what happened to her, but what it reveals about the systems we're supposed to trust. Because a system that works for some, but not for all, isn't broken, it's working exactly as it was designed. Tamla Horsford was more than just a case file, more than just a name on a report, more than the only Black woman at a sleepover that would end in a tragedy. She was joy, she was warmth, she was a mother of 5 who made time for every practice, every homework check, every kiss goodnight. She was the kind of person who made you feel seen, who stayed up late to clean up, who brought laughter into a room full of strangers, and who never forgot to call home, even in the middle of a party. But after that night, all of that was stripped away. The conversation shifted from who she was to how much she drank, from the depth of her character to the content of a toxicology report. And in that shift, something was stolen, not just from her, but from all of us. Because Tamla's story is a reflection of something bigger, held up to a system that so often dehumanized Black women, reducing them to stereotypes, dismissing their pain, and ignoring their families when they demand answers. Her husband, her children, her parents, they've had to live every day in a world that wants to move on, while they're still stuck in the morning after. And that's what makes this so devastating. Not just the loss of Tamla, but the loss of public urgency, of accountability, of justice. So what does justice look like when the system closes the door? It looks like persistence. It looks like community. It looks like refusing to let someone's life to be defined by their death. It looks like podcasts like this. Stories being told with care, not clicks, with empathy, not entertainment, with the goal of remembrance, not sensationalism. Because Tamla deserves that, and so do the hundreds of others whose stories were cut short, then buried beneath bureaucracy and headlines that faded too soon. When the news moved on, her family didn't. When the system said case closed, her loved one said not yet. And every time her name is spoken, every time you share her story, you're doing what the headlines didn't. You're remembering. You're honoring. You're making sure she isn't erased. Tamla Horsford wasn't just a guest at a party. She was a life fully lived and unfairly taken. Her story is not just a tragedy. It is a call to action. A reminder that silence serves only those who benefit from forgetting. But here, after the headlines, we remember. We listen. We speak her name. We say, Tamla Horsford. We say, Tamla mattered, and she still does. Tamla Horsford mattered. She wasn't an accident. She wasn't a headline. She was a woman, a mother, a friend, and her story deserved to be heard. Here, after the headlines, we don't just retell the story, we refuse to let it fade. Thank you for listening to After the Headlines, Unheard Stories. If this episode moved you, share it, say her name, start the conversation. Others avoid it. New episodes drop every Tuesday where we continue centering the lives behind the stories, the voices that were overlooked or silenced. Follow me on TikTok at Solomon LCSW on TH Podcast. And if you'd like to support this work, visit the links in our show notes. Every share, comment, and contribution helps amplify the voices that matters most. Until next time, stay present, stay aware, and never forget the lives that matter long after the headlines.